Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Game Changer. I'm Maryam Zia. In today's program, we will be talking about the agreement that took place between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Last week, we saw a potentially historic development in which Saudi Arabia and Iran agreed to re-establish their diplomatic relations and reopen their embassies within 2 months duration. And we see that both Saudi Arabia and Iran are heavyweights of the Middle East, and how this agreement will be impacting the region, we will be talking in today's program. In second segment of the program, we will be talking about Pakistan's relations with Saudi Arabia and how these new developments that are taking place in the region and beyond are impacting Pakistan and the region. To discuss this and more, I'm joined in the studios by Mr. Sheharyar, who is IR expert. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And we are joined online by Dr. Salma Malik, who is IR expert. Welcome to the program. And with her, we are joined by Mr. Hamayoun, who is IR expert. Welcome to the program. So let me start with you, Mr. Sheharyar. When we talk about this historic development, the talks took place in Beijing last Friday, and this agreement is potentially historic. How do you see this? What has happened? What is going on?
Maryam, thank you for inviting me again today. First of all, I would like to congratulate China, Iran and Saudi on reaching this historic peace agreement, which wasn't looking possible. And since 2016, the diplomatic relations between Saudi and Iran were on the back burner. And these two countries were not talking to each other. And that had a lot of regional implications and economic implications, as well as security implications for the region. Now, due to...
It had deepened the conflict in, Yemen to Syria. So
yes,
how do you see this progress?
Yeah, so this conflict was overflowing into other countries. It was very tough on the people of Yemen, where this conflict was taking place. Then again, it was spreading to various countries in the Middle East, including Syria as well. And now, since this agreement has taken place, this is a new precedent that has been set. And now we're witnessing an important event in the global geopolitical landscape, in which we are moving away from politics of conflict. We are moving away from zero-sum games, and we are moving towards an era where decision making will be done more on economic terms and regional cooperation, rather than one of sanctions and pressure and conflict ridden solutions.
Of course. Dr. Salma, when we look at this agreement, of course, this took place after 7 years of diplomatic breach between Iran and Saudi Arabia. How do you see this? What were the objectives of this agreement and how this is going to shift the balance of power in the Middle East?
Thank you so much, Maryam, for your question and having me on the program. Actually, this is the classic example of how geoeconomics is now steering geostrategy, and the fact that Iran as well as Saudi Arabia were arch rivals and wanted to remain so in the coming years as well. But it is the common economic interest that have brought all of these countries together, and we have offices such as Iraq and Oman who are trying to bridge this gap. And also the fact that we see here that the way economics connect countries, even if they are at the worst of adversarial relations, is an amazing way forward. And this is precisely what we have seen happening between Iran as well as Saudi Arabia. Both of these countries held very, very strong positions of their own, as well as the point that you have just mentioned here, that they are very strong power banks of their own in the Middle Eastern region, having different ideologies, leading different schools of thought. So these are like power poles.
Balance of power in the Middle East, Dr. Salma, how this is going to shift that, balance of power?
Yeah. So the balance of power, the way they are going to shift is that if they come together.
This is a conflict-ridden region. When we talk about Gulf and Middle East, from Yemen to Syria, we see conflicts.
Absolutely. It is going to kind of bring down several of the ongoing problems that are happening, mainly the problem in Yemen, a lot of power play that is happening in Syria, in other places where both Iran as well as Saudi Arabia are contesting. And the most worried amongst all of these Middle Eastern neighborhoods is Israel, because they always wanted to isolate Iran. And this was also the express intent of the United States, which is not a Middle Eastern power, but has remained instrumental in Middle East. So, I mean, it's a bit premature to say that all's going to be honky-dory. Let us see how things work in the near future. But if the economics is the overriding impact here, then both of these countries, and they have very mature leadership. Mohammed bin Salman is one person who has surprised his friends and foes both by striking deals which were totally unprecedented, by bringing about
Of course.
reforms which
And
were
we
very
can link it to the Vision 2030 of Saudi Arabia.
Absolutely. And I was just about to indicate towards that is also part of his Vision 2030. He wants to modernize Saudi Arabia to a point where Saudi Arabia is a forward-looking country and not stuck in old times. So to come out of those shackles of adversarial relationships, Saudi Arabia has also taken this lead, and they have struck deal with Iran. At the same time, Iran also comes out as a country which is not a country that is a spoiler only, but that is a country which wants to progress. That is a country which wants to come out of isolation, and that is going to work a long way. So one can only hope and predict that the future picture is optimistic rather than it goes back into another
Of course,
impasse.
future picture is very optimistic for the region and beyond as well. But Mr. Hamayoun Khan, when we see the timeline and timing of this agreement, what is the significance of this timing?
Thank you, Maryam. I think from the timing significance point of view, it is very important. China brokering a deal in the Middle Eastern sphere shows a very new dynamic. We just recently seen the change of leadership in China. President Xi Jinping has become the third time president, and then there's a change of foreign minister and other cabinet members. China has been very actively engaged in the past in other conflicts as well in terms of mediating them, particularly when you take it the example of Afghanistan. China, Pakistan, Afghanistan together in a trilateral mechanism. China in Beijing, in Xinjiang has helped the current regime in Afghanistan with the Americans and with the other mediating partners. So this is basically a role which China has been increasingly taking up, and this is for the very first time, and that's what your question was, like how significant it is. And second significance is, which Dr. Salma Malik just mentioned, that the world is probably shifting from geopolitics to geoeconomics. We have seen the American way of dealing with the conflict, particularly in the Middle East. America, for the last couple of years, has lost its credibility as a credible mediator because Americans become part of the conflict. China, for China, it is very interesting that it's a relatively low risk and high reward activity. And what they're doing is like.
But Mr. Humayun, this is a very significant point that you are mentioning because in the past we have seen that US has emerged as a significant power in Middle East. So how this agreement and this deal being brokered by China is going to impact the role of other global powers, for example, US, Russia, or Israel for that matter, in the region, Middle East?
You know, there are two ways of answering this question. The positive way of answering this question is better diplomatic linkages between Saudi Arabia and Iran will reduce the likelihood of regional conflict and will reduce regional animosity, which is good for China, which is good for United States of America, which is good for other regional players. But then when we come back to the other side, which is sort of the negative side, the geopolitics, the Americans probably are feeling this thing that China, and we have seen in the American reported media reports that they're not very happy, and they are not very happy that the China brokered this particular deal. When it comes to United States of America and Iran as well, there's a nuclear talk still again on the process of reviving. The Israelis are not very happy with that. So we still have this geopolitical tension existing in the region, but these two major, bigger blocks, Iran and Saudi Arabia, getting closer, coming back to normalization, will have a very huge positive impact on the region and
And
across
especially
the
for the
world.
Muslim world as well. If we look in the
Absolutely.
bigger picture, both are part of OIC.
Absolutely. I think these are, if you see what Sheharyar were earlier mentioning, these two countries have been locked in arms with each other for last 30, 40 years. They were not only fighting with each other directly, but they were indirect conflict, proxy wars in other countries as well. Once they have this better relationship, particularly with the new leadership of Saudi Arabia, Iran is also becoming sort of a progressive nation. Of late, we have seen the society is getting up and demanding rights and other things. So I think if we mix these two, three things together, we see a positive trend coming in the Middle East. So this is going to be a very positive thing for the Islamic world as a whole.
Right, right. Mr. Sheharyar, when we talk about this deal being brokered by China and the talks basically took place in Beijing, so how do you see China's rise on the world stage, especially of course in the past, as we discussed earlier, that US was a superpower in this region. So how do you see this new dynamic?
So Maryam, China is now presenting a new vision for the world. And it is basically emerging as a new power that is like overtaking conflict resolution in this whole arena. There was this very famous analyst who basically, when talking about this particular accord, he basically said this is the first time Asian countries have basically been involved in conflict resolution. Previously, some sort of Western power was always integrated into all conflicts, and they basically played a leading role. And that is now changing. And China is emerging as an international leader when it comes to conflict resolution. And now when we move away from the politics of zero-sum games, we have to like analyze on what all three countries are gaining from getting into these peace accords. If you look at it from the China's point of view, China is now a global consumer of energy. And from both Saudi and from Iran, China is one of the largest importers of oil and energy. And if there is security and peace in the region, that really plays well for China.
Of course.
Now, if we look at it from Iran's point of view, Iran has been under global sanctions. They're not allowed to export their oil and gas.
From the rest of the world.
Isolation. Their currency is depreciating. So it's an incentive for them to get into peace with Saudi, and that would basically give them a lifeline that they really need. Now, from the third partner, Saudi has like major security concerns in the region. The war in Yemen cannot go on forever, and it has to end one day. And obviously, because of the conflict that is emerging in Yemen through Houthi rebels, this is like one area where a peace can be reached. And as you mentioned, the Saudi vision of 2030 cannot be realized if there's conflict in the region.
Of course.
So this is a win-win situation for all three parties that are involved, and this is how the global security initiative will be playing forward, and the politics of sanction will basically take a back seat now.
Of course. Dr. Salma, when we talk about this agreement, the deal is brokered by China. How do you see this, that is Saudi Arabia conducting its foreign policy independent of the West, and what would be the implications of this? How do you see?
You see, the issue is that in today's world, stronger countries like Saudi Arabia, they all are looking at the fact as to who provides them with the best deal. For China, the main issue is that they want to have a very safe, secure passage for their economic goods when it comes to the realization of the BRI. And these are the partner countries which are part of the larger deal. And unless and until there is peace in the region, things will not work. Given the global recession, given how the US has overstretched many of its allies, mainly Saudi Arabia, countries like Saudi Arabia are now realizing that their resources also sort of shrinking and getting limited. And as Sheharyar Sahib had also pointed out, that this endless conflict with the Yemenis, for which the Saudis are on a separate track of conversations and dialogues with the Houthi in Qatar or in Oman. So what we technically there find is that these countries are trying to bridge all the problems that they had, and get into domestic reforms, get into the fact that there is a lot of revenue that comes out of positive engagement rather than negative engagement. But Saudi Arabia is a country which realizes its worth, it realizes how important it is, and the US cannot discard Saudi Arabia. Where Iran is going to remain now will become a little out of isolation, but Saudi Arabia's role as a frontline Muslim country, leader of the Muslim world, custodians of the Holy Mosque can never diminish. So the US cannot really isolate Saudi Arabia or can play politics with Saudi Arabia. They have already done the oil politics. They have already milked the Saudis as much as they could. So this is something that the US now has to realize, rather more than the Saudis need to realize, that there is a limit of isolating countries. There is a limit of playing a global chessboard, because countries have their own interest that they need to look after. And the regional interest, and I think this is a wiser choice that these countries have done, is that the regional politics definitely have a stronger impact on countries of the world than far-reaching, larger political ambitions. So again, I say that this is a good time that this has happened. It is interesting that this has happened, but how well do we see this coming out? How well it is articulated? There are issues.
Mr. Hamayoun, let's talk about the implications, how this agreement would impact the ongoing, conflicts in the region.
Well, I think it's very important. It basically gives a look of an impending prosperity which the entire region was needing. Two of the main pillars of Middle East in terms of their economic power, in terms of their population, in terms of their religious outreach. If the Saudi side and the Iranian side make peace, in which we have seen, and thanks to China and other friendly countries helping them, I think this will have a very, very positive impact, not necessarily from a geopolitical point of view, but from geoeconomics point of view. These two countries not fighting with each other, reviving their relationship, opening up their embassies, and then we have seen the vision of the leadership in both the countries that they want to gradually move toward a progressive look of the Islamic societies. So if this thing happens, it will have a definitely positive impact in the conflict in Yemen, in Syria, in other places as well. Particularly if we also take the example of Pakistan and then Afghanistan as well. We will have a very serious positive things coming towards our side if these two countries get together. Saudi Arabia is the largest oil producing country. Iran is the second or the first largest in producing gas producing country. Pakistan and other Middle Eastern countries are in a crunch. Pakistan wants to extend the China-Pakistan economic corridor towards Central Asia as well. We want investment from our brotherly countries, particularly from the Middle Eastern countries. And if there is peace between Saudi Arabia and Iran, there is a huge potential that these countries would be investing in the neighboring countries to diversify their portfolios. So I think it's a very, very positive impact on the conflict.
It will be having positive impacts, but Mr. Sheharyar, let's talk about the steps. What steps would be taken for the implementation of this agreement? What stage are the negotiations at this point in time?
So I'll basically talk about the next steps when it comes to realizing and taking this peace accord forward. So generally what has been decided is that in the next 2 months, both countries will re-establish their diplomatic embassies in both of these countries.
Reopen their offices.
They will reopen in less than 2 months. Other than that, the security arrangement or the security agreements that were signed between Saudi and Iran, they will start, they would be re-established. And then cooperation in the fields of economics, in the fields of culture, sports, they will also restart as well. To take this forward, China has also basically asked for another GCC conference that would happen after these embassies and these missions are reopened. And after that, China will host both of these countries in Beijing again to basically sign a longer term agreement that would basically further cement this cooperation. I would also want to point out when I was reading or analyzing the media reports that were coming out, there's this very famous analyst, John Alterman. He basically is a Middle Eastern expert at the CSIS think tank. He basically said that there was this perception that the US led rules-based order was the only option that was available in the world to basically, for countries to basically resolve their security-related needs. And China has very efficiently, smartly changed that perception.
Of course.
And now China has presented an alternative model in which it's taking a leadership role. And as Dr. Salma and Hamayoun Saab have like already mentioned, that this is like something that is like more attractive to the regional powers.
So this is a surprise to the West.
This is definitely a surprise, and they would also have to reevaluate their Middle Eastern strategy. And obviously, Dr. Salma also like pointed towards the Abraham Accords that the US was pushing through the force of sanctions, through the force of pressure. So that politics, I think, will take a back burner now, and countries will now start taking decisions based on regional integration, regional cooperation, and that would define how things will be moving forward.
Of course, of course. Mr. Hamayoun, when we talk about Pakistan's relations with Iran and Saudi Arabia, Pakistan considers both countries brotherly. So how do you see this historic agreement is going to impact Pakistan's strategic position in the region?
Oh, absolutely. It's a very important question. And I think from many different angles, from many different variables, it is going to help Pakistan. Let's take the example of Gwadar port, or the development which is happening in China-Pakistan Economic Corridor in the sphere of Gwadar. If there is a peace between Saudi Arabia and Iran, there is a huge potential that the Gwadar port would be connected with Chaba port. There's already talks there. The security situation between Pakistan, the bordering area of Balochistan, and on the Iranian side will also increase. Trade, we have IPI gas pipeline, Iran, Pakistan, India gas pipeline, depending upon if India is going to join it or not, but IP gas pipeline. Pakistan is in a big need of energy resources. So if there is, if this peace accord continues to be implemented in future, Saudi Arabia has invested or promised to invest around $10 billion in Gwadar area, in a petrochemical city and a refinery. If we can get the resources of Iran and Saudi Arabia together and tap it with Gwadar and also in the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, this is a huge significant thing. And then we also have this sectarian conflict which is in Pakistan for a very long time. It has caused us a huge security dilemma. So if there is a peace between these two countries, I think the sectarian change is also going to be reduced in Pakistan, and we will also benefit from this particular agreement.
Right, right. Thank you very much, Mr. Hamayoun Khan, for joining in today's program. We were talking about the historic agreement that took place between Saudi Arabia and Iran after 7 years of diplomatic breach. We will be taking a short break here, and when we come back, we will be talking about Pakistan's relations with Saudi Arabia. To discuss this and more, we have to take a short break. Welcome back. We will be talking about Pakistan's relations with Saudi Arabia. When we discuss Pakistan's relations with Saudi Arabia, they are deeply rooted in history, common religion, and they go beyond this as well. Pakistan and Saudi Arabia signed a treaty of friendship in 1951, and a large number of Pakistanis are living in Saudi Arabia, and they are sending a huge amount of remittances that are over $5.8 billion to Pakistan and contributing to Pakistan's economy. We will be talking more about key areas of cooperation between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. To discuss this, we are joined online by Dr. Fazalur Rahman, who is Director, Pakistan Institute of China Studies, Sargodha University. Welcome to the program. So, Dr. Fazal, when we talk about Pakistan's relations with Saudi Arabia, how do you see, what are the key areas of cooperation between the two countries?
Well, primarily it's a very traditional, very strategic in nature and very brotherly relationship between the two countries. And the two countries have proven that they can stand by with each other in an hour of need. Pakistan has been helping Saudi Arabia in many ways. And similarly, Saudi Arabia, which is an oil-rich country, has been helping Pakistan out in terms of its economic crisis whenever they occur. So there is a complementarity of bilateral interests that bounds the two countries together. That is also, as you have mentioned, it's cultural, religious, and also in geostrategic terms, Pakistan is a good partner and a good friend of Saudi Arabia in regional matters. And we have been trying in the past also to help Saudi Arabia normalize its relations with other countries.
Right. So, Mr. Sheharyar, when we talk about economic relations between both Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, how do you see different trade agreements and MOUs? What role do they play?
So, Maryam, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia's relationship is based on mutual trust, mutual cooperation, and it's a very unique relationship that we have. We also need to keep in mind that over 2 million Pakistani expats are currently based in Saudi, and they have been working in developing Saudi's infrastructure. We have our doctors operating in Saudi, we have like our bankers, financial experts. So even in the development of modern Saudi, Pakistanis have played a very crucial role. Other than that, these expats, Pakistani expats working in Saudi Arabia are a source of remittance that Pakistan gets, and that amounts to over $5 billion. So that's a big amount that Pakistanis basically send back.
And how these remittances are impacting Pakistan's economy?
Obviously, like any sort of like financial input that we can get from across the globe, where Pakistanis are like providing their services to other countries, that's always a positive plus. Right now, we're getting around $2 to $3 billion every month from Pakistani expats who are based across the globe. And Saudi Arabia makes a huge chunk of that. Other than that, whenever Pakistan is going through a financial crunch, it's Saudi Arabia that has always stepped up and basically provided financial, economic.
Of course. And in recent floods as well, Saudi Arabia was the second biggest donor to flood victims.
And as we know that Pakistan's import bill consists largely of oil imports, Saudi Arabia has always provided Pakistan oil on deferred payment system as well. So Pakistanis basically get oil according to this arrangement, and they pay later. So that's a huge benefit for Pakistan. Other than when it comes to MOUs, it's like these MOUs are in various sectors. It's like defense, economic cooperation, agriculture,
So what specific initiatives or projects have been launched as a result of these agreements and MOUs as we talk of?
So if I like start historically, Saudi Arabia has always been helping Pakistan in the education sector. As we know in Islamabad, we're like sitting here, Islamic International University has been established by Saudi grant.
Of course.
Other than that, if we basically mainly focus
Faisalabad was named
after King Faisal.
Yes.
When we talk about the whole CPEC architecture, Saudi Arabia very keenly has shown its interest in joining. Hamayoun Sahab already mentioned that a $10 billion investment of the Saudis is like already awaiting to establish an oil refinery in Gwadar. So that's a huge areas there where Saudi is like already operating.
Of
and
course.
Once when we're like talking about recent investments, Saudi Prince was here a few days ago, and he established a tech IT park, and he has basically dedicated $100 million for Pakistan's IT industry and anyone who wants to contribute in this sector.
And that is of course significant for Pakistan's IT sector
Very
as well.
Significant.
Of course. So Dr. Salma, when we talk about Pakistan's relations with Saudi Arabia, how do you see these relations have evolved over the years, and what key factors have influenced these relations?
Thank you, Maryam. Pakistan's relations with Saudi Arabia are kind of where you could actually say that there's nothing to negotiate about. It's a very warm relationship. Pakistan looks up to Saudi Arabia. Pakistan has very deep-rooted affections when it comes to Saudi Arabia. But having said all this, looking at the practical side of things, there's a lot of remittance that comes from Saudi Arabia. As Dr. Sheharyar mentioned, the labor market that Pakistan has. From time to time, Pakistan has also contributed security forces to Saudi Arabia for protection of the holy sites and other things. So they're multi-pronged economic, security, labor, various shades of relationship, plus the fact
Right.
that Pakistan and Saudi Arabia shared a vision when it came to fighting off Soviet Union way back in the 1970s and 80s. So all of these things put together, tomorrow how the thing looks. I would bring it back to the previous segment that you had. This provides both Pakistan and Saudi Arabia with an open line of access when it comes to
Of course.
trade,
Of course.
commerce, and access to the various global as well as regional markets. And the message that comes out of such unprecedented accords is that we need to take into account that if you try to sanction and if you try to box countries or regions into areas of your one's
Right,
own
because previously
interest.
Pakistan was in a difficult position when we talk about Pakistan has
Pakistan
to
was in a
pick
very
between
difficult
Saudi
position.
Arabia and Iran.
Absolutely. And if you may recall, there was a time in way back in
Right, right.
1974
Dr.
when
Salma.
Pakistan held the Second Islamic Summit. What an ideal world that was. Shah of Iran was there, the Saudi king was there, anyone and everyone was there, and that was the pinnacle of Muslim ummah and growth. So we may not actually think that that might come back. That was a glorious time for all the Muslim countries of the world, and Pakistan was taking a lead. And just imagine the overall environment where you could travel by road through all of these countries, and there were no problems. And this area, if external elements had not created so much of fissure and differences between the different various neighbors, this would have been a European Union or a Middle Eastern Union of its own kind. And so many things have happened over the decades that have thwarted such an intent. And that was the intent. I don't want to indulge in conspiracy theories here, but this is the time through prospects such as the BRI and all, where Pakistan can actually now enjoy that breather that it is getting through this accord, where
Of course.
Pakistan can have good relations with Iran as well as with Saudi Arabia. The ethnic conflict that Pakistan has faced, or the sectarian conflict that Pakistan has faced over the years, that can also kind of get settled or can get bettered. And all of these proxy fields that these two big Middle Eastern powers had created in countries of their neighborhoods as well as in the region, all of those can actually now simmer down to a point, because they have also realized that this is a mindless conflict that they're heading into, and that is detrimental to their personal health. So it
Of
can be
course.
actually a very, very welcoming thought in the coming days. And Pakistan needs that breather given our economic situation. Pakistan is desperate for having secure, easy, stable neighborhood as well as regions through which it can progress and use this opportunity provided by China to head to a path of progress.
Of course, of course. So let's talk about Mr. Sheharyar. Let's talk about CPAC. Saudi Arabia, we know, already shown interest in BRI project. So how this agreement is going to impact Saudi investment in CPAC and its impact on Pakistan's economy?
So, Maryam, technically Saudi's top Aramco oil company has shown interest in establishing an oil refinery in Gwadar, and the investment amounts to over $10 billion. So, what's the significance of this refinery being situated in Gwadar? Right now, China is one of the largest importers of Saudi oil. And through the current route through the Indian Ocean, it takes around 40 days for that oil shipment to emerge from Saudi and get it transferred to the south, through the South China Sea to Chinese ports. If this oil refinery is situated in Gwadar, this whole time will be reduced to 7 days only. So you can see the significant time that is saved through establishment of this oil refinery. Other than that, it's not just China that will be basically taking benefits. Central Asian republics, they would also get access. Then this refinery can also be used by Russia, who's also after the sanctions due to the conflict in Ukraine. Russia is also looking eastwards to find new markets. India is a huge market that is importing Russian oil on discounted rates. And now we can also link it to this peace accord that has been signed between Saudi and Iran. And once this regional dynamic becomes peaceful, it's a win-win situation for the whole region.
Of course, this is a win-win situation for the whole region, but I want to talk specifically about Pakistan's energy security. How significant is Saudi Arabia for supply of oil to Pakistan, and how these projects, once initiated or once in progress, are going to impact Pakistan's energy sector?
So Pakistan is heavily dependent. It's an energy-starved country. We need oil for our transportation. We also use oil for energy production as well. Given that Pakistan is going through an economic crisis right now, Saudi has always been there, and we've already discussed that Saudi also provides oil on emergency basis, on deferred payment systems. So that facility is already available to us. Other than that, Saudi is always very forthcoming when it comes to shoring up our reserves at the state bank. That facility is also there. As soon as the IMF deal is signed in the coming weeks, we will get a lot of support from the Saudi and Dubai as well. So all of these factors combined with cooperation in the CPEC, and CPEC is a long-term, game changer. I would say currently it's unfortunate that we're just looking at cash injections from the Saudi state. But once this oil refinery is established, once Saudi starts investing in our mines, especially the Recodec mine, there's also talks that Saudi wants to invest there as well. So these are longer term initiatives which will basically make Pakistan more economically independent and help Pakistan to develop its resources and not relying on bailouts.
Of course, of course. Dr. Fazlur Rahman, this is very important when we talk about energy sector. How do you see the future prospects of energy cooperation between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, and how they might evolve as a result of these evolving situation in the region?
Well, actually, when we talk about oil refinery, then there is a very wide range of byproducts of oil refinery, which Pakistan has to import from either UAE, Saudi Arabia, or some other oil producing countries. So those byproducts will be available in Pakistan at cheaper price. So that will save us with foreign exchange, for that kind of money that we spend on these products. And the other thing is that, our overall energy security in terms of our capacity to hold it in terms of storage is very limited. I think having an oil refinery will also enhance, from defense point of view, our energy especially petrol security, storage reservoirs. So it's going to benefit us in many ways, and it will not only add to our energy security but also to our defense-related security also.
Of course. But Dr. Fazlur Rahman, let's talk about the recent regional developments. How has Pakistan's and how will be Pakistan's relations with Saudi Arabia impacted as a result of these regional developments?
I think that Pakistan has been one of the proponents of supporting rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. In the past, we have made efforts and we have offered our good offices for facilitating dialogue between the two Muslim brotherly countries. But unfortunately, because of the intensity of political issues, we could not succeed. China has the right kind of clout and the right kind of size in order to leverage this kind of negotiations, and they have been very successful. And I think this has surprised many countries globally, especially the Western world, that how China has succeeded to achieve this agreement. Let me also make a little, injection here about the nature of this. This is not a peace accord. Many people are, misperceiving this as a peace agreement. It's basically an agreement to restart negotiations diplomatically on various issues. So this is the beginning point, and it has to go a long way, and China is going to facilitate this process, I think, in the coming days and in coming weeks, which is going to be. But China has established its clout in the Middle East now as a dominant power, which can influence the political dynamics of the region. And Pakistan, being a very close and good friend of both Saudi Arabia, Iran and China, I think there is a huge opportunity we can really look forward to, and try to woo investments from the region into our special economic zones, relating
Try
it
to
again to
leverage the situation, of course. Of course. Dr. Salma, when we talk about Pakistan's relations with Saudi Arabia, how do you see the future prospects for relations, and what could be some of the challenges and how to address those challenges?
What Pakistan technically needs to do is to now raise a workforce which is technically savvy. I mean, we need to get out of that typical labor class uh, people that we would send there, because it is no longer a time for simple construction or stuff like that. What we need to have is vocationally enabled individuals who are semi-skilled to better skilled, to draw more remittance from there. Most of our market is being captured by other regional neighbors, and they're doing a pretty decent job. Once upon a time, there was this restriction that only Muslims would go there. Now we have seen India has captured the entire Middle Eastern market, including Saudi Arabia's. The other thing that we need to do is that we also need to realize what are our internal weaknesses, what are the problems that Saudi Arabia is facing, and try to develop an interface, again based on a common economic linkage, that can work for the betterment and sustained relations between the two countries. Pakistan has always stood by Saudi Arabia. Pakistan will stand by Saudi Arabia, and it is a reciprocal relationship. But just mere statement of these facts is not sufficient. Every country which is now growing on an economic path grade, they have to see as to what their even best of friends is offering them. This is the realist world. So from Pakistan's side, I can only say this much, that we need to evaluate what are the needs of the future 10 to 20 to 30 years from now, and how we build the Saudi market for ourselves, and how through this CPEC, the market that we are trying to build, my learned colleagues in this program, all those things that they have pointed out, the Gwadar port, the coastal beltline, so many other opportunities that Pakistan has to offer, the climate a friendly state that we are. There are so many options that Pakistan can offer to the world, and also on terms of tourism, that we need to capture this particular point. If the sectarian conflict that was there because of several factors, which were larger regional factors, simmers down, I think this will help a lot. And one additional point, I'm sorry I could not hear Professor Fazlur Rahman's point. If he has already talked about it, then my apologies for repeating. And that is to have a very solid partnership when it comes to Afghanistan. Because security in Afghanistan is integral for security of the entire region, Central Asia, Pakistan, South Asia, as well as larger Middle East or Western Asia. So Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Turkey are all going to be part and partner of a larger security framework in the coming days, and we need to chart out to be the leaders in this game.
Of course, of course. Mr. Sheharyar, when we talk about these larger scale investments, CPAC is a major project. So how do you see, how does Saudi Arabia's interest in CPAC project is going to impact the broader geopolitical situation of the region?
So we've already discussed how Saudi can basically benefit from investing in CPEC. That's like mainly through the Gwadar port. Through the Gwadar port, like the establishment of the oil refinery, access to minerals and raw materials in Balochistan. So that's like one area where Saudi can really take benefit of connecting with CPEC. Other than that, obviously through Gwadar, Saudi gets like access to Central Asian republics, and vice versa as well through Gwadar.
So how does China's growing influence in the region has impacted Pakistan's relations with Saudi Arabia, or is going to impact the relations?
So right now, China's interest in the region is basically mutually beneficial for all players involved. So especially after this peace agreement that is like formulating between Pakistan and Iran, this will like further strengthen the regional cooperation and the areas where China basically looks forward to developing a framework in which mutual cooperation will like take precedence over any geopolitical leanings. Other than that, Dr. Fazal also like mentioned that China has the financial and economic muscle to basically bring all sorts of like rivals on the table. Even when these peace accords were being discussed, we have to see that China also like gave access to Iran to $20 billion of capital that was frozen after the nuclear peace deal was, unilaterally the US pulled out of it.
Yes.
So to get Iran on the table and to get Iran to cooperate, China basically gave access to those $20 billion to Iran. Other than that, when we talk about, you asked me about the Chinese influence. Chinese influence is growing in the region, and one analyst from the West basically pointed out, even when these talks were going on, these talks by all three countries, it was a statement that they were not made in English. So the Chinese basically used their language, then there was Farsi, there was like Arabic, and that's how these negotiations took place. So this was a big statement that was like coming from these countries. And as I also like mentioned earlier, one analyst also basically said that this peace accord was basically done by Asian countries only.
Of course.
So that's like a step forward.
And this is significant for the region as well. But we are talking about Pakistan's relations with Saudi Arabia. So Dr. Fazalur Rahman, how do you see, what are the main opportunities for closer cooperation between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia?
Well, actually, we have to look at the recent developments that are taking place in Saudi Arabia. They are reforming their policy, they are conducting internal reforms, and they are trying to change the dynamics of their economic trajectory. I think we have to monitor that very carefully and try to interface our advantages with their development too. Not only that, we can also invite Saudi investment in our special economic zone. So far, we have not been able to attract, required number of investors in our special economic zone. So perhaps Saudi Arabia, which has shown keen interest since 2019 in CPEC, so we should try to bring them in. And also now, because there will be a rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, we should also think in terms of connectivity, developing CPEC westward and through Iran into Turkey and some other Central Asian states.
Of course. Thank you very much, Dr. Fazalur Rahman, for joining in today's program. Thank you very much, Dr. Salma Malik, for joining in today's program. Thank you very much, Mr. Sheharyar Khan, for joining in today's program. In today's program, we talked about the potentially historic agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. When we talk about regional stability, the regional stability is prerequisite to economic development of the region, and Pakistan and Saudi Arabia also have a shared vision for the economic development. That's all from Game Changer tonight. Take care. Allah Hafiz.